I've seen that, various kind of people were arrested and harassed under these laws. And usually the harassment happened pre-trial. There was this young school teacher who was arrested like in the middle of the night. There were other women as well, young women, 17-year-old girls, for, very, it's not even like they were really criticizing anyone.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the DigiPod. Today, I have with me Priya Ahsan Chowdhury, who is a barrister and advocate of the Supreme Court and also an associate at Dr. Kamal Hussain and Associates in Bangladesh. We're talking about the cybercrime law in Bangladesh, how it evolved, the kind of implementation, and also now that there is a political regime change and a reform process, what is the conversation around it? Priya, thank you so much for making time. Before we get to what is happening currently, could you just take our audience through the inception of the cybercrime law? What is the title of this statute and what led to its enactment?
Thank you, Farieha, for having me. Well, first of all, before I start, I guess you're talking about the Cybersecurity Act, which is the notorious law that we have at the minute in 2023. But when it came to, when it was enacted in 2023, it repealed the Digital Security Act, and it basically almost mirrors Digital Security Act, I would say 99%. And Digital Security Act had repealed a particular notorious provision along with a few other provisions of Information and Communication Technology Act 2006, which obviously came in force back in 2006. And Digital Security Act had come into force in 2018. So it's basically been like a cycle, one after another, abusive law. Now, the ICT Act is actually not entirely repealed, but there was this provision which was extremely abusive. So that was repealed along with a few other connected provisions. And so, yeah, that's that.
So how have you, what was the conversation or narrative around the enactment of especially laws for the digital sphere?
So the Cybersecurity Act and the Digital Security Act were kind of enacted within 5 years span of, there was only a gap of 5 years between the two laws. And like I said, it was literally the same laws. I don't know why they really decided to do another law. Only few amendments that they had made were like they reduced some punishments, like the penalties and stuff, made certain provisions bailable. Those were non-bailable in the previous one. So that was that. I suppose it was like a eyewash. I wouldn't even say it was a cosmetic change because they literally kept the offenses as it was in the previous law. So, most of the time, whenever, the lawmakers were questioned as to why do we need these kind of laws when we have so many abusive provisions within them, the answer would be that, we are now a digital Bangladesh and, women and children are all the time facing a lot of harassment online. So we do need these kind of laws and stuff like that. But then we didn't really see many women and children getting any kind of help out of these laws. And also, of course, the speech offenses that have been in these laws were very, very abusive, but there were also other provisions which were not really speech offenses, but I'm not sure how much those were, effective in combating other kind of crimes. Also, I can't say that those other provisions were also very much at par with international standards, but then not even sure how useful those were. But these laws were predominantly actually very notorious for the speech offenses because they were basically abused left, right, and center to shut dissenters.
This is something similar that we've seen with the Pakistan law, where the conversation was that women and children need to be protected online. There's a lot of harassment, but we saw that the cybercrime law has primarily been used against dissidents. What kind of cases have you witnessed under these different laws that you mentioned over a period of time? And it seems also with other perhaps provisions of existing laws. I mean, for instance, in Pakistan also we see that there's a combination of special digital statute, but also with penal code offenses. What kind of cases have you witnessed in terms of the abuse and the dissidents going after dissidents that you've mentioned?
So if I go back to the ICT Act, actually, I'm not even sure what kind of you know narrative was coming out of the regime which actually enacted that law, because that was enacted by a regime before the very latest regime, which was ousted, right? But at that time, it wasn't abused so much. I think there were very few cases filed under them, and then obviously they were out of power for some time, and then this law, this section 57 of ICT, that was abused under the previous regime, like the recently ousted one. And the main abuse actually started from, I think, 2013, when they amended it and allowed for arrest without warrant for those kind of offenses. And that's how it was, always critiqued by, everyone basically. And then in 2018, I think just before the elections, I think that was also probably, probably because it was elections coming up, that's why they wanted to do it. So they just repealed that, but then enacted the Digital Security Act. Again, did the same things like arresting journalists, arresting other kind of dissenters, general, citizens, including women, children, all those kind of people, and just arrested them basically. I've through research and sometimes through my work and stuff, I've seen, or just through reading in news reports, I've seen that various kind of people were arrested and harassed under these laws, and usually the harassment happened pre-trial. It's not like all these cases went to trial and convictions happened. Of course, convictions happen, but probably in very few cases, extremely few cases. Most of these cases get discharged or just cancelled out later on, court or something like that. So I've seen, like, there was this young school teacher who was arrested like in the middle of the night. There were other women as well, young women, 17-year-old girls, for very it's not even like they were really criticizing anyone. It was many a times it was just like some post that they'd made, it offended someone somewhere, and some case was filed, and they would be many of them would be actually picked up, not really arrested, because obviously arrest has a procedure, right? And many a times you could see that it's not just for women, it's for like everyone they arrested, could be journalists or other dissenters and stuff. What they would do is just turn up, in plain clothes, not for everyone, but for many of them, and just pick them up from their homes or wherever, and then take them in. Nobody would know where they are. And then suddenly they would be shown arrested under this law, and then they would be in jail for some time. Then they would be released after some time. Bails would be denied, especially lower courts would most of the time, deny the bails. Most of these cases would have to go up to the high court to get bail.
It's as though, you are talking about Pakistan, and especially some of the recent cases as well, where it's almost as a pattern where people get picked up and they are charged belatedly. When they are produced and a charge emerges, or bails are denied in the lower court. And, part of the conversation here is that process is actually punishment. And what you're saying, that pre-trial is essentially when they are dragged through this. So even ultimately, if it's discharged or there's a quashment, there's a certain degree of harassment that they have experienced during this time. And it seems as though that's also what's happening. But is this still the case in Bangladesh? Because, of course, there's a sense outside of Bangladesh that, now there's a change in the political government, and there's an interim setup, and there's a reform process. But on this front, how have you marked the difference, if any?
Well, there are many other things happening right now in Bangladesh, which at the minute, we probably won't have the time to go into. But I think under this particular law, I can't really say that there are too many cases now. I mean, I haven't heard there aren't too many reports around. I'm not sure when, but so the whole process kind of started back in October when they first proposed to amend the law get rid of the speech offenses. But I mean, everyone they consulted, the stakeholders and everybody, they sort of said that, you shouldn't just amend it, but repeal it. So they said, okay, fine, they would repeal it. And then they put out new drafts, basically, of a new they're trying to put out, which is the Cybersecurity Ain, which would mean cyber protection ordinance, because you can't have an act at the minute under this government. It's in the process. I think at the minute there's like some 19 drafts which have been drafted, because they've been making changes. But the problem is, every time there've been very little changes they've been making. They haven't really made many public consultations. That's a bit of a problem. And the 2 or 3 probably public consultations that were on, those are for a very short period of time. So maybe not many people could also actually engage with it like that. But outside the public consultations, people have engage with it. Organizations have sent out submissions and stuff to tell the government how they want it to be done, listening at all. But the process have been a bit not so transparent initially, but then I guess they're trying, because they haven't yet put out anything. I mean, they haven't finalized any ordinance yet. So yeah, I guess that's that. But yeah, it's in the process. I'm still hopeful. In fact, I've also had the opportunity to kind of, say, working with people putting out submissions and stuff, including with BLAST. BLAST as in Bangladesh Legal Aid and Services Trust. And I've also worked with them to put out submissions to the government and stuff. So now let's see, in terms of not just the offenses, not just the speech offenses, but also like how they have provisions for arresting people without warrant and stuff like that. We've recommended on those things, to how we've basically told them what to do with those, those provisions and stuff. So now let's see what they do. For speech offenses, I can't say that 100% of speech offenses are going to go, because it seems like they want to keep some, but most of them are gone. One positive thing is, though, that now they're shifting from just having too many harmful, as in penalizing harmful content, things like revenge porn, online sexual harassment, child sexual abuse material and stuff like that. But then there's also an issue with definitions and stuff. So, other groups have also recommended definitions and things like that to them. So let's see what they do. Thank you.
One of the challenges is, right, this balancing act of sorts, where you have laws that protect away, for example, like you've mentioned, revenge porn, harassment, etc. But then in the same laws, there tend to be provisions, like many speech offenses, which then are used to curb dissent. And like you're saying, the recommendations are sort of about repealing and not just, making any cosmetic changes. But could you just elaborate a little bit more about specifically the speech offenses, right? And how damaging some of these offenses, but also coupled with the procedures, like you're saying, that it's not just about the offenses alone, but also recommendations and procedures that you feel need to be changed. And I'm sure that has come as a result of the implementation that you've witnessed.
In terms of speech offenses, if I talk about specifically the cybersecurity, like I said, Cybersecurity Act or its predecessors are not really the only laws which are, relevant for the online space. We also have other laws like Pornography Control Act. Even the Penal Code is actually relevant in many ways. We also have the Bangladesh Telecommunication Regulation Act. All these things kind of are relevant for the online world, but at the minute, because we're talking just about the Cybersecurity Act. So this one, like its predecessors, had very sort of very vague provisions, like things like if you annoyed someone online, that would be counted as a criminal offense. Now, you don't know what is annoying, what is insulting, what is humiliating. Then things like affecting the image of the nation, and those kind of things have all been, penalized under that law. Also, for there's this provision called penalizing religious sentiments, for hurting religious sentiments and values. Now that actually comes from the penal laws, like as in the Penal Code, which is obviously colonial era law. That the penal code, or I mean, the penal code offense, for the penal code offense, there's some procedural safeguard. I can't say that was very helpful because I suppose even penal code have been used, not just in Bangladesh, I suppose even in India, maybe in Pakistan as well, have been used that, that provision have probably been used against minorities, I suppose. But under this law, I mean, this thing that got that thing about hurting religious sentiment that came from penal code, but under these laws and the cyber laws, it didn't even have any procedural safeguard at all, and people have been implicated under these laws as well. They have tried to change that around a bit, but they're still trying to keep something. Maybe now it would be something like provocation, but we're trying. I mean, in our recommendations, we recommended that they don't, if they really want to keep something like that, then it should at least reflect, say, Article 20 of the ICCPR, which is about there being some kind of violence connected to it. So you can't just say that if you're provoking someone's religious values or something, then you'll be a criminal. Basically, you can't say that anymore. I mean, at least we've recommended that they don't do that. If they really want to keep it, then at least they should follow Article 20 of ICCPR. So apart from those annoying, insulting, humiliating, those kind of provisions, we've also had defamation. I shouldn't say we've had, because that law is still not repealed, so it's there. We still have it. It also has defamation. Obviously, so if it's repealed, then they'll go. But the point is, criminal defamation still remains under the penal code, so it doesn't make too much of difference. Under the previous version of Cybersecurity Act, which is the Digital Security Act, so the penalty for defamation was much higher than the penal code, although it was the same defamation thing, right? But under the Cybersecurity Act, they had reduced actually they got rid of imprisonment. So it would just be fines under the Cybersecurity Act. So that's that. But again, if you get rid of defamation, it doesn't make a big difference because, like I said, the penal code one still remains. But of course, those other abusive ones are now gone. And hopefully, if they really listen to our recommendations, pretty much all of these speech stuff would be gone. And if the religious part will probably remain, in lines of ICCPR. Just hoping for the best, really.
No, absolutely. Because I mean, in terms of the misuse, of course, and what you've also spoken about procedurally, I just also want to ask, because this is something that keeps coming up in cases, in terms of, I mean, you've arrested somebody, you've picked somebody up, but then connecting them to the crime. And especially in the digital age where there can be, fake profiles, your accounts can get hacked, etc., and what somebody says in somebody's name, and also search and seizure, for instance, right, where procedurally you can prescribe certain things. Like, for example, the Pakistan law prescribes a warrant, but we've not seen that really in practice. It's really when you arrest a person, you take the devices, and then irrespective of self-incrimination, protection against that, we don't see it at least play out in practice. And I mean, one, the law can be bad, but then the practice and the way it's implemented can be even worse. And what have you witnessed in the Bangladesh context with respect to some of this?
I think through the research, whatever I've seen is that I mean, everyone seems to talk a lot about the arrest without warrant issue, because obviously that curbs your civil liberties. Obviously, everyone should, and we all do actually. But the point is, it's not just about that. These laws also allowed search and seizure without warrant, and most of the time, what they would do is they actually would seize this stuff. Whoever they would pick up. I wouldn't even say arrest, like I said. Even arrest without a warrant has procedure, right? But most of these times, in most of these, they would actually just turn up and just take someone without even informing them about their, about their offense or why are they being taken and stuff like that. So, and when they would do that, they would also seize their belongings, like their laptops or phone and stuff like that, and those just remain with them, to be honest, until the case is disposed of and stuff. And I can't talk for all the accused because I don't know much, because this, I mean, people don't seem to report much on the fact that people's belongings are also seized and what happens to those. So I don't really have much data, but from the few cases that I've seen, at least from from my work, as in our chambers, whatever I've seen through while working with my senior and stuff, that those belongings are sort of gone because we don't know if they'll ever get them back, because the investigations seem to continue forever. And even if the investigations are kind of stayed for some time and stuff, nobody's giving back the belongings, because they're there. So that's an issue. So, I mean, there are many issues in it. So it's not just being implicated under these laws, but also like the way they're arrested, the way their belongings are taken, sometimes how they are treated in custody. All these things are sort of, connected. And like I said, the laws are abusive, but at the same time, the practice is even more abusive. Like, you see that, like I said, arrest without warrant is a problem. But the point is, even arrest without warrant have to have some kind of procedures, and you need to follow some steps when you do that. But they don't even do that. They just turn up in plain clothes and take. That's been happening. I'm not sure if that's happening in terms of the Cybersecurity Act any longer, but of course, it's still probably happening, maybe in other contexts.
Right, and just finally to wrap up, Priya, what are your hopes? Because obviously from the outside, we're looking at that, there's a minute understanding of what is happening. There's political reform going on. There's a different government. I mean, what would you hope to achieve? And do you think that the things that you've discussed even in this, or whether it's respect to this law or the laws, that there is an understanding of just how coercive it has been and why it should be changed, and is there the will to do so?
Well, I mean, there are many reforms commissions which have been formed, and their reports are coming out now one after another. And there's also been a media reforms commission. Blast has also been able to interact with them and kind of put out their recommendations and stuff. And many other people or many other organizations probably have also done that. I'm kind of hopeful in the sense that I'm not sure whether everything will be possible before another political party takes over through an election and stuff. But it's still a positive thing. Of course, there can be frustration when everything is being digged into. Like everyone is trying to change everything at the minute. So there's a bit of frustration among some people. But yeah, so it's, like I said, I mean, in many ways, certain things may seem like everyone is looking forward to something really extremely ideal. I suppose that comes from the sentiment that such a big change happened just like a few months ago. I suppose that's why everyone wants everything perfect at the minute, and obviously that's not possible and that's not happening. And it's legitimate to comment on it, to obviously criticize it. But at the same time, I like the fact that things are moving somewhere or the other. At least people are talking about it, and even authorities are talking about it. So that's great.
Thank you, Priya, for making time. This is all that we have on the DigiPod and DawnNews English today. Priya, thank you so much.